All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tapping into Transit, your weekly transit spotlight. I'm Iadiapolo with Transportation Riders United, and today we are pleased to have with us Nick Schroeck. He is an associate professor at Detroit Mercy Law School with a specialization in environmental law. Nick is also a member of our True Board of Directors, and today we're going to be discussing the intersections of transit and the environment and climate change. True did a virtual town hall on this topic a little while back, and we just wanted to kind of invite somebody that we consider an expert to do a deeper dive onto the intersections of transit and the environment and why developing transit can be better for the environment and better for communities. Well, before we get into that, for joining us, how are you doing today?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for being here. So our first question, really simply put, can you elaborate on the impact that riding or developing transit has on the environment and climate change?
Yeah, well, I mean, it has a big impact because the number one contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, things like carbon dioxide, is actually the transportation sector. So the way that we move about our communities to and from work, to and from school, driving around in personal automobiles, that is the number one contributor to greenhouse gases, which are the driver of climate change. And so when we look at transit, the thing about a bus or rail is that you can fit a lot more people onto that one mode of transportation. And so if we can pack 50 people onto a bus and get from point A to point B, you're only using that one vehicle, only burning the fuel from that one vehicle. Even better if we can get those buses to be hybrid buses or buses running on hydrogen or all electric. That is an even more significant savings of fossil fuels. Because again, most of our cars on the road today, most of our light trucks on the road today, they're burning fossil fuels, right? They're using an internal combustion engine running on gasoline. Mm-hmm. And so, this graphic here illustrates the number of people that you can fit on a bus takes up significantly less space on the road. And that's also significantly fewer cars that are going to be, burning gasoline. Also using other petroleum products like oil to keep the engine lubricated. There's oil products involved in making tires, all sorts of different components of vehicles as well. So if we can reduce our reliance on the automobile, that in turn, greatly decreases greenhouse gas emissions and can help us smooth out this choppy transition into a warming world. And make no mistake, climate change is here. It's happening. We're already experiencing the effects of it. And so we need to really now talk about mitigation. How can we slow the effects of climate change? How can we make it so that our cities continue to be hospitable, thriving places for us now and into the future? And a great way to do that is to build our transit infrastructure to make it easy, quick, safe for people to get from point A to point B, everywhere they need to go, as we say at True, on transit. That should be a goal that also has, again, big benefits for reducing our carbon footprint and lowering greenhouse gas emissions.
Mm-hmm. Because the higher number of people that we can get riding the bus is simply the fewer number of cars that we have out on the streets, and that's the smaller amount of greenhouse gases that are going out into the atmosphere. And kind of as you illustrated with that graphic, there's also just like a real sustainability factor here because one single bus can carry, like you said, up to 48 people, kind of seeing that graphic as opposed to one single occupancy vehicle. So that's a really great way to illustrate that point. Did you want to elaborate a little more on that?
Well, yeah. I mean, the other thing that I would say, Andre, is that, think about the amount of money and the amount of resources we spend on roads. Right. So the other thing that graphic shows is that by reducing the number of vehicles on the streets, we can have smaller streets. We can put our roads on a diet. We can add more bike lanes. Having people cycle to work when they're able to, or to and from events with their families. I mean, that's a great way to, again, reduce our overall carbon footprint in this country. And by putting our roads on a diet, that means less time, money, all of the work that has to continue to keep our roads in passable condition. And in Michigan, this has been an incredible struggle, right? Mm-hmm. I think we're still in the midst of trying to figure out how to fix the damn roads. And part of the problem is that we just have too many cars, we have too many trucks that are using these roads, and not enough resources to maintain them. And the other thing is that there are significant climate impacts from major construction projects, from producing the amount of concrete that it takes to work on our roads, or asphalt, again, which is also a petroleum-based product. So just having roads, maintaining roads is something that is also a contributor to climate change. Also, roads, big highways, they remove green space. They remove the ability of plants and soil to soak up rainwater. And so when the more roads we have, when we have bigger rain events and intense rains, like we're getting more and more often here in Southeast Michigan, that water has to go somewhere, and it's been collecting and pooling on our freeways and roads, causing all sorts of traffic disruptions. So, if we can eliminate or at least greatly reduce the number of vehicles that are on the road, that has benefits just from the straight up point of using less gasoline because we have fewer cars on the road, people using transit, but it also then frees us up to invest our money in other ways, investing in trails, investing in bike lanes, investing in more transit opportunities for people to get where they need to go. So there's a lot of benefits to transit from an environmental perspective. And, the other thing is that it's great that we're seeing significant investments in electric vehicles and in autonomous vehicles for people's, personal vehicle use. But that doesn't solve the road problem, right? Like that's still, as we see here in this depiction, if you have 48 people in their own personal electric vehicle, that's still a lot of cars on the road. That's still a great deal of maintenance. And again, the industries that do our road construction, the concrete, the asphalt, those are very carbon intensive industries. And so again, if we can reduce the number of lanes in our roads, reduce the number of vehicle miles traveled every day, that just continues to have knock-on effects that are positive for our environment.
Yeah. And again, well put, especially, talking about development and kind of how we invest our money, transit and, promoting transit and expanding transit isn't just good for the environment, the atmospheric environment and the natural environment, but also our developed environment, the communities that we live in. And I think you made a really great point about kind of, reshaping the way that we, basically get around can help mitigate climate change, kind of, very simply put.
Yeah, and I mean, another benefit of transit from a climate perspective is that transit riders need to plan ahead, right? If you're going to take the bus to a grocery store or to a Meijer or some other superstore or something like that, you need to plan ahead, right? Like you need to, okay, which route am I going to take? What time am I going to get on the bus? How am I going to get there? And so I end up planning. So my wife and I were a one-car household. We have been for the last 11 years. Primarily, I ride transit to and from work. So when I have to think about errands and things I'm going to do, I plan ahead, right? Like either I know that I'm going to a particular intersection on the bus, on transit, to get what I need to do there, or I plan my vehicle trips on a Saturday or Sunday such that I get my 2 or 3 errands done all at once, and I'm not constantly going back and forth from my house to a store, from my house to another store, from my house to another place, and that decreases the amount of miles that are traveled, which in turn then reduces the amount of gasoline and fossil fuels that we're burning. And the other thing is that when we look at the sources, the contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, it used to be just 10 years ago that the way that most greenhouse gases were emitted in this country was from our electric generating facilities. So power plants generating electricity, burning coal to keep the lights on, burning natural gas to keep the lights on. Well, now we've actually seen that transportation has moved into the slot as the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions. So we've actually come a long way in boosting renewable energy sources in our electrical power sector. So, wind turbines, solar panels, great increases in energy efficiency. Now we really need to get a handle on transportation. I mean, this is the sector that continues to grow. It continues to be a bigger slice of the pie of greenhouse gas emissions. So this isn't just some theoretical thing like, hey, it would be great if more people could ride transit. We need to get a handle on our transportation emissions, or we're not going to see an overall reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions, and we're going to continue to see just havoc in our climate as things get more and more challenging due to a warming atmosphere. And so, and again, the key point is that when we look at the transportation sector, we hear a lot about airplanes, and they are horrible from a greenhouse gas emission perspective. But by far, the biggest source is passenger cars, right? Our vehicles that people are using to get to and from work. Light trucks, this is another very big piece of the pie. And so if we can reduce the number of cars and trucks on the road by people riding transit, that will help us, again, continue to kind of bend that curve of greenhouse gas emissions and hopefully make it so that we can, figure out what it means to adapt in a warming world. What types of investments do we need to make in our communities to make sure that they're stable and resilient in the face of a warming world? Because, as I said, it's already happening. We have a long ways to go in the electric sector too. Don't get it twisted that like we figured that all out. But we've seen much more focus and intention there at power plants, and I think we need to have a renewed focus on not only efficiency of vehicles and promoting electric vehicles. That's huge. But again, we need to get cars off the road, because having people riding a bus or riding a light rail, something like that, that is a much better use of our resources collectively from maintaining, developing roads and all of that. But it also then again has great benefits to the climate. And just one other thing I want to point out, Andre, is that planning for transit can also help our communities be very resilient in that people can plan about, like, okay, I know that when I get to this particular place, I get off the bus, maybe you get a ride, someone picks you up, takes you all the way home. But at those hubs, we can have stores, we can have the types of amenities that people need, and that helps us better plan our communities and can decrease the amount of sprawl that we continue to see in Southeast Michigan.
Right.
Because again, sprawl, gobbling up green space, that's another thing that continues to contribute to climate change.
Right. All very important thoughts, and thank you, Nick, for taking the time to get into the details about why we should be riding transit and helping out the environment by stepping on the bus for the first time. So, in short, if you were concerned about climate change, consider taking the bus safely, mask up, try it out after you get done voting this November. Get on the bus, get out the vote. Nick Schroeck, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. And the great thing is you meet awesome people riding transit too. So you can make some friends, meet some colleagues. And so it's good for the environment, good for us as citizens.
And good for you. Yes. And if you liked this show and want to check out more about Transportation Riders United, you can find us at DetroitTransit.org or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Detroit Transit. Check us out on YouTube and on our Facebook page to check out more episodes of Tapping into Transit. Nick, thanks so much again for your time, and we'll see you next time, everybody. Thanks.